Hello and welcome back. Now in this section, we're going to get started with data tables. Data tables provide us with a way of storing information, and that information can come in really handy when it comes to implementing behaviors such as this. Here I have a base weapon, and I have a enum called weapon type, and it's set to submachine gun. Now, when I change it to assault rifle, you'll notice that the mesh changes. And when I change it back to submachine gun, the mesh changes to submachine gun. But that's not all that changes. There are a whole bunch of variables and properties under the hood that also change whenever I switch this enum from one weapon type to another. Let's take a look at another one I have. Here is an enum called item rarity. And notice I have some other variables here such as glow color, item background, light color, dark color, etc. Now, as soon as I take this item rarity and set it to damaged, you'll first notice that the material on the weapon changes, as well as glow color, icon background, light color, and dark color. Here I have number of stars, it's set to 1. Now, if I switch from damaged to common, you'll see that these colors are all green colors and number of stars switches to 2. If I switch it to uncommon, it's blue and number of stars switches to 3. So I have a single enum and all of these other variables are changing with it. Now, these variables are getting their information from a data table. So this is just one application that you can put data tables to use for. Let's get started creating data tables. Now I'm going to go into item.h, and here in Visual Studio I'm going to right click and close all but this. That way all my other tabs are closed. Now here in item.h I want a data table, so here are the following steps to create a data table. First of all, we're going to scroll all the way up to the top, and just above item.generated.h, remember that has to be the last include, I'm going to add an include for engine/datatable.h. And this is the header for the data table. Now, in order to create a data table, we're going to have to make a struct that inherits from a struct class called FTable row base. Now, just under our last enum called eItemType, we're going to create a struct. And I'm going to call this fItemRarityTable, and it's going to inherit from, I'm going to say public FTable row base. That's a struct that's in that data table header file. Now, this is a struct, and it's going to have a uStruct macro, and I'm going to give it a blueprint type keyword so this can be valid as a type in blueprints. Now we need to give this a generated body. That way we'll get all of the built-in reflection code generated for us. Now for this struct, we're going to add some variables, and these are going to be variables associated with our data table. I'd like to create an F-linear color called glow color, and I'm going to give this a U property, edit anywhere, and blueprint read write. Now, when we create an asset called a data table, the data table is going to have some variables in it that we can set, just like the variables we would set on any other blueprint. So we're going to have a color called glow color. Now, depending on an item's rarity, I'm going to want 2 shades of a color for that item's widget blueprint if that item is a weapon or some other object that has a pickup widget. Remember, if we go back and hit play and we hover over one of these weapons, you'll see that this widget has a lighter blue and a darker blue. So this rarity table is going to have a light color and a dark color associated with that particular rarity level. So I'm going to make another F linear color called light color, And I'm going to make an F linear color called dark color. I'm going to go ahead and give these both the same U property. Now, another thing associated with an item's rarity is the number of stars on that pickup widget. So I'm going to add an int32 called number of stars. And this will also be edit anywhere blueprint read write. And finally, the icon background for an item is going to be a certain color depending on its rarity as well. So remember, I'm going to go back into the editor and pick up some items, and you'll see that each of these has its own different color. These are going to be associated with item rarity as well. So I'm going to add another variable of type uTexture2D, and that's a pointer, and it's going to be icon background. And this will also be edit anywhere blueprint read write. So this struct is going to be used in conjunction with our data table. Let's see how this works by actually creating an item that derives from the data table class. So we're going to go into our private variables, and I'm going to add a new variable. I'm going to forward declare class uDataTable and call this item rarity data table. Now I'm going to make this a U property, and this is going to be edit defaults only, blueprint read only, category data table, and of course we need our meta specifier here. Now I'm going to go ahead and give this a comment and say item rarity data table. Now, uDataTable is not the same thing as FTable row base. FTable row base is a struct type that allows us to organize variables that will be used with data tables. The data table itself is going to be of type uDataTable. Let's go ahead and compile this and see what it looks like on the editor side. Okay, so we're now compiled and we're back in the editor. Now in the _game folder, I'm going to create a new folder called data tables. This will be for where we create our data tables. So now we're going to create a data table blueprint. Now if we right click and select miscellaneous, we can choose data table, and it's going to ask us to pick a row structure. Data tables organize data, and they organize it according to a row structure. And when we choose our row structure, we're going to choose item rarity table because that is the struct we created that's derived from FTable row base. So select item rarity table, and in case you forgot, I'm going to show you the item.h class and scroll up to the top where we declared item rarity table. Item rarity table is the row structure we're selecting here. So click OK, and now we have a data table. I'm going to call this item rarity data table. Let's open the data table by double clicking on it. And here is our data table. Now take a look. We have a data table tab and a data table details tab. Now in the data table tab, we have the ability to add items to our data table, and take a look at this. We have glow color, light color, dark color, number of stars, and icon background. Now if we go back and look at our item rarity table struct, those are the variables we added. Okay? So back here in the data table, if we want to add an item to this, we can click on the plus icon here where it says add. Now as soon as I've clicked add, we have one new item, and by default it has a name called new row. If you click the drop down here, we'll see that new row is the only option here because we only have a single item in this data table. Now you can right click on this row and click rename, and we can give this row its own name. I'm going to call this row damaged because damaged is one of the rarity types. Now we can see damaged in the dropdown here. Now, under this item rarity table section, we have glow color, light color, dark color, number of stars, and icon background. And take a look. These are editable here. That's because if we look back at F item rarity table, these variables are edit anywhere, blueprint, read, write. So we're here in blueprints. This is a data table blueprint, so we can adjust these colors. Let's select some values for these. Go ahead and expand glow color, and we have RGBA values. This is going to be damaged, so we want this to be a sort of gray color. I'm going to give this a value of 0.42 for the red, 0.42 for the green, 0.42 for the blue, and 1 for the alpha. And that gives us this nice gray color here. For light color, I'm going to give it the same values. So we're going to say 0.42, 0.42, 0.42, and 1. Now for dark color, I want a slightly darker gray. So for this, I'm going to give it values of 0.09 for red, green, and blue, and 1 for the alpha, and that gives me a darker gray. And since this is damaged, this is the lowest rarity possible. It's going to get 1 star. So I'm going to go ahead and put a 1 there. And for icon background, I'm going to click the drop down and select damaged background. And that gives me this gray background icon that we got from the GitHub page. So now we have this single row in our data table, but we can add more rows. Let's go ahead and click the plus, and now we have a new row. I'm going to right click and rename this, and I'm going to call this row common. This is going to be the common rarity. For glow color, I'm going to give this a green color. So I'm going to give this red a value of 0, green a value of 0.15, blue is going to be 0, and alpha is going to be 1. That will give us a sort of dark green. For the light color, I'm going to give red 0, green 0.44, blue 0, and alpha 1. That gives me a brighter green. And for dark color, I'm going to give it the same as the glow color. So let's give this a value of 0, 0.15 for the green, 0, and 1. And finally, we have number of stars. Now, this is a common rarity. This is going to be associated with 2 stars. And the icon background, we're going to use common background, and that's this green icon here. So now if we select this drop down, we have 2 choices to choose from because our table has 2 rows. But we can add even more. So we're going to click add. A new row is going to show up, and I'll go ahead and click this and drag it down so we can see our items here. I'm going to right click and rename this, and this one will be called uncommon. Now uncommon is going to be associated with a blue color. So for this we're going to have 0 for the red, 0.04 for the green, and 0.5 for the blue, and I'll give it 1 for the alpha. For the light color, I want a lighter blue. I'm going to give this 0, 0.4, 0.8, and 1 for the alpha. That's a nice blue color. And then, of course, dark color, I'm going to give it the same as the glow color, which is 0, 0.04, 0.5, and 1 for the alpha. Now, uncommon is going to have 3 stars, so number of stars will get a value of 3. And for the icon background, I'm going to type uncommon and use uncommon background, and that's the blue one. Okay, let's click add and get a new row. I'm going to rename this row to rare. Now, rare is going to be purple, so I'm going to give this glow color 0.2, 0, 1, and 1 for the alpha. And light color is going to be 0.55, 0.2, 1, and 1. And dark color is going to be the same as the glow color, 0.2, 0, 1, and 1 for the alpha. and rare is going to be 4 stars. So number of stars will be 4, and icon background is going to be rare background, and that's this purple one. Now I'm going to add one last row to our table, and I'm going to rename this one, and this one is going to be legendary. Now legendary is going to have a golden color. So for red, let's do 0.97. And then for green, we're going to say 0.27. Blue will be 0 and alpha will be 1. Now light color is going to be the same as glow color for this one. So 0.97, 0.27, 0, and 1. And then dark color will be a slightly darker, almost a rust color, and that's going to be 0.44, 0.09, 0, and 1. So now we have our colors. Number of stars for legendary, it's going to get 5 stars. And icon background is going to be legendary background, which is this nice orangish gold color. Okay, so now that we have our data table all set up, and we can select any of our rows from our dropdown to see their values, we now have information that we can use on our item. So let's go ahead and save this. Now, how are we going to use this information? Well, first of all, we created a data table variable on our item class, so we can actually use that. Let's go back into C++ here in item, and let's hit Control-KO if you're on Visual Studio. That's a shortcut to open the C++ file. And let's go to the onConstruction function. Remember, this is the C++ version of the construction script. It gets called when the item changes or when we move it in the world. We can use our data table in here to set the values of some of our variables on the item class. Now this is how we use it. We're going to load the data in that data table. So let's create a comment and say, load the data in the item rarity data table. And here's how we do it. We're going to create an F string called rarity table path, and this is going to be the path to the data table in our project. We're going to use a text macro, and we need the path to the data table. And we can get that by going back into our editor, finding our data table, and right-clicking on that, and selecting Copy Reference. Now we've copied to the clipboard this data table's path. And if we go straight back into Visual Studio and paste it in between these quotes, we get the data table's path. Now we have a string, this F string, that holds the data table's path as a string. So let's go ahead and give this a comment and say path to the item rarity data table. Next, we're going to create a local variable of type uDataTablePointer. uDataTable, that's a pointer, and I'm going to call this rarity table object. Now, how do we get a data table corresponding to the table in this path? Well, we're going to call a static function called static load object. Now, static load object is sort of like create default subobject in the constructor. It gives us a object of the type that we tell it, and it's asking for a uClass. Now, uClass is either a T subclass of, or another way to get a uClass is to simply call static class on a particular class. For example, if we say uDataTable : static class, then this gives us a uClass for the uDataTable. And next it's asking for the outer for this class, but there is no outer for this class, so we're going to use null pointer. Now next we need to provide the path, and it needs it as a C-style string, so we can use rarity table path, this F string we have right here, but since it needs to be a C-style string, we need that asterisk operator prepending it so that we can access that C-style string. Now, static load object is going to return a uObject. Now we need to cast this to uDataTable because that's the type that we're trying to store it in. So right here, we're going to say cast to uDataTable, and we're casting the result that's returned from static load object. So we're going to put that in parentheses and add our semicolon here. So rarity table object is going to get a data table object, and we're assigning it a value corresponding to the path that we pass in as the rarity table path. Now, if the object is valid, then we can access rows from this table. So first of all, we need to check if rarity table object is valid. If it's valid, then we can access items in the table. We're going to learn how to access items in the table in the next video. So we'll see you then.